Okay. Okay, call the meeting to order. Good evening. This is the regular scheduled Architecture Board of Review for Tuesday, November 1st. Happy November. Roll call, please. Mike?
Okay, sure. Member Cottrell.
Here.
Member Dahlman.
Here.
Member Deegan.
Here.
Member Kerouac.
Here.
And Member Stradiff.
Here.
And Chair Hunter.
Here.
Here, okay.
Okay,
All
the
six.
first order of business is to welcome Ed Deegan back as a member of this committee. He's took a 2-year hiatus, and we missed him, and now he's back, and so we're in better shape than we were last week, or last month, I hope.
So you think?
So I think, yeah.
So you think?
He
Okay.
looks a little older.
I do feel older. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do the minutes for the last meeting. Any thoughts, changes?
I move to approve as submitted.
Okay. Second, okay, all right, we're still doing roll call.
Yeah,
All right,
okay. Member Stradiff.
Here.
Aye or
Aye.
nay?
see you.
Everything's thrown off.
Member Kerouac.
Aye.
Member Deegan.
Aye.
Member Dahlman.
Aye.
And Member Cottrell.
Aye.
And Chair Hunter.
All right,
Okay, motion passes, all aye.
okay, I don't see any big audience out there, so there's not any question about request to address the ABR unless there's somebody online.
No, nobody online.
Then we'll move right ahead. So the next is a public hearing to review site, oh no, I'm looking at the minutes. Okay, we're not doing that. Well, it's called review a site plan for public safety building, but that's really not a site plan. So you want to give some background on that, Mike?
Sure, yeah, so we have a project for next year, actually several different projects, but one of them has a component that affects the appearance of the PSB. We're planning to re-roof the shingle roof, the flat roof, and do a little bit of masonry work on the building. We discussed last time the shingle roofs, which have an ice damming problem caused by air leaks. The existing insulation under the sloped roof is fiberglass bats that are aluminum foil faced. And the problem is, there are nailing strips on the trusses for those to be nailed to, but it doesn't really make an air seal. And so, the conditioned air in the attic, which connects right to the office spaces, is really leaking out right under the roof deck, melting ice and, melting snow and ice and sending it down the roof to form ice dams on the lower part of the roof. In your packet, I put together a little sheet with advantages and disadvantages of 4 different options. And to start with the bottom on that list, options 3 and 4, either re-shingle the roof with ice and water shield or re-roof with metal roofing. Those options are probably likely to stop the leaking, but not actually stop a lot of what goes on there. It would probably still be creating ice dams, they just wouldn't leak through the roof, so you'd have giant icicles, as we do now, coming off the roof in various places. We've got some heat cables in a few places to keep those off of doorways and stuff, but sometimes we see humongous icicles coming off the roof in places there. And it would also still leave the air leaking, which is, create some temperature and humidity issues in the building, maybe mainly humidity. So it would be less than an ideal solution to do either of those. The metal roof option would be expensive. Option number 2, closed cell spray foam. If we replaced the fiberglass and foil-faced insulation there with closed cell spray foam, it'd bring up a couple issues. One, that's a plenum return to the HVAC system, which, closed cell spray foam is always a very flammable material, always needs a coating sprayed on it to meet the flammability standards for an exposed surface. We would, if we wanted to keep the plenum return, we'd have to find a coating that actually met the standards for a plenum rather than just the ordinary standards for exposure, or change the HVAC system so it's not functioning as a plenum. But, you know, doing the closed cell spray foam and taking the fiberglass insulation out, that would create a huge amount of disruption inside an occupied building, especially, you know, a public safety building where it has to function 24/7 and normally has people in it 24/7. It's a, you know, big request to get people out of there because they've still they can't stop operating. So that's a lot of disruption, which brings us to option number one, which our consultant, Phil Mahan, who's here today from Structural Technologies, found for us, which is to do these Hunter panels. I have a sample on the corner of the table there. And the sample's upside down there so you can see the text, but the sheathing would be up and the foam would be down and it would be thicker foam. But it provides an air channel between the foam and the new sheathing over the top of the existing sheathing and adds insulation and adds airflow to keep the roof cool and allows us to close off the existing soffit and roof peak vents to eliminate air leaks to the building too. So, and Phil is here, and Phil, feel free to step up to the podium here. Even though we can all hear you, we try to talk into the microphones because there may be someone on the local cable access TV watching, and you know, it keeps our presentation recorded. Okay.
Because there's a couple things.
Okay, great, that's good.
So it is a double like that. It's both of those layers together.
So the way this goes, first off, let me introduce myself. I'm Philip Mahan. Structural Technologies has owned the company, started the company 30 years ago. Focus has been on building envelopes, roofing systems, exterior wall systems, waterproofing systems, everything. Basically, if it's outside the building, we do it. But because the built environment inside of a building is like this, it's got condensation, it's got people, it's got showers, and in a public safety building, you've got a whole lot of stuff going on there, but it's more than anything else, it's occupied 24/7. We have worked with a lot of the villages on this type of thing. OWP&P was your original design developer, architect, and what they did was a pretty common thing with public works buildings. I'm sorry, I have to turn my hearing aids down because they are going to just explode here in a second, I think.
Yes, I think I could turn the dais volume down. Yeah, Bob Hunter here, our chair, was with OWP&P. He was the designer there.
Okay. In the 1970s, you guys all remember those well, most of us. The energy code was completely different than it is now. As building codes progress, as Mike would be the first to acknowledge, in 1993, things changed dramatically. From the IBC code, took over the Uniform Building Code, Uniform Commercial Building Code. When that happened, we started looking at ice damming, we started looking at ventilation in attic systems, we started looking at the building envelope completely different. We were done letting heat escape from buildings and let the buildings breathe. We started to switch to a closed, sealed building type system because we found we could condition our air inside of a building more proactively than to say, let's open up the windows and see what happens with our furnaces and our air conditioners. So it changed. When that happened, in that drawing that's in front of you, the inside wall, which is projected here, we still had soffits. If you go back and look around this village, you'll see a lot of places where that eave is maybe 4 inches maximum. Very little overhang, no vents, closed attic system. When we went to this, we started saying, okay, let's ventilate this area to forget about what I've added at the top here, is to get airflow underneath that sheathing, insulate this area in here, and cool off our roofing system. Why? Who promoted that? Yes, the shingle manufacturers. Because at that time we had organic shingles, and when the roof heated up too much, the asphalt burned up, oxidized, and fell apart. So it had nothing to do with your environment inside, it had everything to do with shingle manufacturers. Because they started giving longer and longer warranties. You had a bonded roof back in the 1970s and 80s. Then they started offering 15-year warranties, 20-year warranties, 30-year warranties, unlimited lifetime warranties. So they had an obligation to figure out how to make their shingles last as long as possible. Had nothing to do with your interior environment. And Mike, you and I have talked about this. Things changed completely. Who started driving building codes? Manufacturers, because they knew their systems. Windows, walls, roofs, decking, all this was manufacturers coming to the building codes officials, to Oak Ridge Labs, to multiple labs and say, test our systems, United Lab, Underwriters Labs, Factory Mutual. Insurance companies got involved in everything. So the end of the day, that all happened in a microcosm. Since I've been in this business, I started in 1984, started this company in 1993. In that time frame, I said, what is changing? What's happening in the industry? And it was literally evolving towards a market where manufacturers were driving building codes, and they still do. So the reality is Owens Corning, GAF, ICO, Certainty, all these guys said, well, how do we get our roof shingle to have the least amount of exposure to exterior damage? Ice and water, sunlight, heat, and cold. That's all they were trying to do. So in 1993, the bottom layer of that, where that eave extended to an unheated area, and the inside was heated area, back then you weren't even required to put a roofing felt on. That was an upgrade. Ice and water shield was unheard of. WR Grace didn't even exist in that market yet. They evolved because the codes changed. They said, we have to have ice and water shield 24 inches beyond the heated line of that building upslope. A lot of buildings like yours have an overhang of almost 2 feet. So instead of one sheet of ice and water shield, you needed two. And I can tell you 90% of the residential roofs in the 1990s do not have that. So they didn't accomplish anything. Ice and snow damming, why did it happen? Because we made these big eaves and we changed our air-conditioned and conditioned environment within a building a lot. Worse yet, around that same time, everybody was starting to put in a building like yours, let's stick all the ductwork up in the attic. That way we don't have to worry about it. We can put the air conditioner outside, but let's stick that ductwork up in the attic. We won't insulate it. So now you had all this heat bleeding off into an attic space. You had humidity from a gas-fired furnace bleeding off in your attic space. If you even perceive that these walls are airtight, they're not, because underneath every cove base, you get moisture and air going into it. It bleeds up in the system. Every one of these can lights, any penetration up there can bleed moisture around it. So you got humidity going into an unconditioned space from a conditioned space, and it condensates. We tried to control condensation by venting, by doing all kinds of stuff. The reality is that once you get moisture into an attic system, the first thing it hits that's cold and drops below what's called dew point causes visible condensation. No different than a glass of ice water on your desk right now in this room will sweat because it hits condensation point or dew point. So airflow was one way to control condensation. We didn't want to put power attic vents on every roof. So instead we put static relief vents, can vents, up at the top of the ridge line. We put eave vents underneath, and we started out with a 1 to 450 ratio of venting. Then it went to 1 to 300, and now your commercial building needs a 1 to 150 ratio. So every 150 square feet of floor space in an attic needs 1 square foot of venting space. It's impossible, almost impossible to do with the under eave vents that you have right now. You literally have to cut them continuously around the building. So that's number one. That's to get your airflow. Again, this is to protect your shingles, and without it, they won't warrant it. Does it do anything for you? No, it doesn't do a damn thing for you. What it does for you maybe prevent ice and snow damming, but not necessarily, because insulation is the best defense against ice and snow damming. The perfect place for insulation in a building is just like most of us have homes, not a vaulted ceiling like this, regular home, 8-9 foot ceilings, insulate the heck out of the top of the ceiling space, make sure you have an air barrier there. Now your attic's cold, your interior's fine, you don't get ice and snow damming because you don't have heat bleeding into those outside walls. Can't do that on your building. The building's already built. It's got a lay ceiling in it. All that heat and conditioned air is going past that acoustic tile ceiling up to the bottom of what OPNP designed. A roof deck, with foil-faced fiberglass insulation. Problem was, is with any kind of insulation, to make that airtight, which Mike brought up, can we foam it? And that's one way to do it. It's a little late in the game. So all the foil-faced insulation have to come down, all the lay ceiling would have to come down. You have to evacuate the building for 3 days, foam the underside of it, and you're very likely gonna have a good insulated system. Don't deny that a bit. Kind of invasive on your end of it and very expensive. So how do we deal with an as-built environment? That's what this is why this exists. Hunter Insulation, NRG, which is a John Manville system, developed this to create a new attic space beneath either a flat roof or a shingle roof. I'm doing one on a flat roof downtown in the city, and I'll get into that for a second, but DuPage County Juvenile Detention Center, Carroll Stream Fire District, Hanover Park, I could name a dozen of these that I've done. The reason why is simple, is that right now you have 2 layers of plywood sheet, and you've got, the reason they put a second one on is because the first one was rotten. So the second one went on, this imagine is your roof deck. That's what is there right now. First thing's gonna go down on here, add membrane, is continuous water pressure, ice knowledge, across the entire length. Now, continuous, non-permeable area. Second thing goes down is basically insulation. Screw fasten through, here's your wood decking, it's already there. Man up for some wood decking, don't have to lot. The next area that goes on is this. And I'll slide this down to the end. So it's like that. We have that 2x4 neighbors out here on the edge. And we have to allow this to stay open off the face of the building. Right now, can't really tilt this up. You have to create continuous vented space, which is similar to the bridge vents that are now in slot mesh vent. Snow country roof systems that are on most people's houses now. Brings it there from the backside of the fascia into the space, continues up to a bridge line, and that's how you get a new conditioned airspace outside of what you have right now. The top side is water remembering. Synthetic felt is also, we did tests on this, is also air permeable but waterproof, and then the sheet system also goes on which is for water shedding, not waterproof. So there's scale on it. So the idea is that what you do, you create an aerospace that cools this roof, insulates the interior, isolates the interior from the exterior so you don't have hot spots. We're adding an R value of about 17 to the top side of the building. We have an R value right now on the inside of 6 inches of oil base, which people take is about R13. You're right at the R30 value that you're supposed to be at a commercial building. So that's the system in a nutshell. Tested this out. I've been doing this since for 10, 15 years almost. Carroll Stream Fire Station had a very similar system that icicles that would form all the way down to the ground. DuPage County Detention Center, they actually had their furnaces and everything out in the attic. It was relative temperature was around 80 degrees in the attic before we did this. Yeah. We stopped it. But every system has, a design Achilles, I would say that. And the thing on this one is really the perimeter eave venting. We have a big eave there that has slotted vents in it down here. I talked to Mike about this. Right now, those are open vents. Those have to be closed so we get a venting through this. We don't want to have 2 levels of venting here. This could cause this to bypass and this won't work then. So this is your venting system, goes up and over. Those have to be capped. Cap them, might be ugly. I know they've been talking about the soffits underneath here. You could put a layer of 1/4 inch thick James Hardie board, cement fiber board over the whole thing, seal it again. That's one way to do it. That's an expensive way to do it. Aluminum slotted vents or aluminum solid vents, hid vents. They're just interlocking. They're 3/4 inch thick. They would not be venting at all. That we need to put in there. That's a little less expensive than the Hardie and less maintenance. You won't have to paint it. But it's built for the building. The sheet metal on there right now on your building is copper. We're going to be able to cover all the wall panels on every piece that Gutters and downspouts will all change and the fascia changes. The fascia, what we brought was, this is cellular PVC. You know, the marine industry, drop in water, 10 minutes later, it's all like this. Thank God, my boats. But the reality is, we get this out, the vents behind it, that's gonna be clad with sheet metal. That looks just like a copper.
The sheet metal or aluminum?
Star bronze, pre-finished, and we'll do aluminum. Yeah, I've got another one that's a little lighter color, but the intent, that is called dark bronze, and it's intended to exactly match the sheet metal that's up there right now. Thought I had one. Maybe it slipped out the car. That is the same thing, you make the gutters out of it, you make the downspouts out of it, everything, no corrosion. Everything we use on attaching a gutter or downspout is stainless steel. We don't use any of the stainless steel screws. Any nail that's holding the shield down, we have the Almax hot dip nail, which is the highest end that are available in pneumatic guns. They don't rust. Your standard bright shinies, as they call them, brass nails, will rust in about 10 to 15 years. And then you start to lose the problems with this. This system is designed, I can't have a guarantee with all the shingles will last. I love the fact they say these are 40-year shingles. I can tell you that this is a 30-plus year design on this. I'm confident in that, and the rest is still getting a little. It's a warranty system by Owens Corning, GAF, Certainty, Malarkey, Pickman, all of them want the same system. I'm a big fan of Owens Corning right now. This duration shingle is one of the best that's out in the market. Timberland is also awesome. They just upgraded Europe. What changed between these guys, these guys had a nail strip, a double ply, and bottom strip came stuff. This, underneath here, is a self-sealing strip. And they have to put the nail in the center of this, but it was designed to show it like that, so you can see exactly where the nail. One of the things that sugars do, they go along, and when they reach over here, the nail gun drops just a little bit, and they have a shiny nail. So 6 nails per shingle, 3-foot length. That's more than is required for results. Required, go to 4 to 5. I go to 6 because of hurricane winds that we keep getting those derrick trails through here. We want to make sure the shingles stay on. Algae side is blended into this. Mike and I talked about this. It's a copper additive to the asphalt to prevent algae from growing. Yeah, the dark streaks that you'll get on the roof, sometimes those you can't avoid because that's streaks on top of it. It's the acid from the oak trees and stuff like that on there. I said don't wash your roof, but there are different roof things, let it, forget it. Sounds silly, but that's how the case hardware washes it off. You don't use the pressure washer. Another thing about these shingles in particular is granule retention. That's really important because that's what keeps the asphalt component from being exposed.
So if you could use the microphone, or if you guys.
Sorry.
Not catching on this.
The asphalt, if it's exposed because of degranulation, you'll end up having it oxidized prematurely. And that's something, again, ISO 9002 and all this stuff came up to try to manage changes in formulations. The reality is shingle manufacturers are beholden to nobody but themselves. ISO 9002 is a great idea, but then they changed, like the Timberline Ultra HD is now the Timberline something else HD. I swear they change these things every 2 years. It used to be I could spec out a shingle and say I need a 330 pound per 100 square foot weight shingle, and you could find that in any kind of literature. It's not available anymore. You can't even find the tensile strength on the fiberglass mat. They won't advertise it. And Owens Corning started that war with GAF, and GAF bought out a couple other manufacturers. Owens Corning bought out a couple, and so it's very difficult. So these are minus a upgrade to what is called a, I don't want to say architectural because they're architectural limit, but they're highest end shingles with Owens Corning and all these guys. This is as good as you're going to get. And people say, well, why don't we go up to the next level up, the premium, superior, whatever they're called? Because they make so few of them that, in fact, I see them failing. We're houses down in Barrington and houses around. They'll put the super high-end shingles out there, and they fail because they're only making such short runs of them that they never get to see how they last. And shingles don't normally fail until about 10 years. And when they fail at 10 years, You gotta take the whole thing off. And the warranties, I can tell you guys, I look at the warranties, I go, look at the avoidance of how they won't pay for it. So after 15 years into a shingle's life, you basically don't have a warranty. So the big thing is pick something out that's high quality, but everything underneath that shingle is what really helps it perform. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we're doing. Mike and I have been over this quite a bit. We went over the building code stuff that he had specific concerns about. We're gonna leave the insulation in place as it is right now, because I feel it's not acting as a good air barrier anyway, but it does give you some insulated value, and it would be disruptive as heck to try to take it out.
Let's see who has questions about this. Matt, you have thoughts?
Thank you for your presentation, that was very thorough and very helpful. I have one question about the venting behind the fascia board. Is that like a continuous?
It is, around the end. So it looks like, did this shut off on me?
No, I just turned the volume down a little bit.
Just turn down the volume on it.
Yeah, right.
It is continuous. There's actually I do two levels of it there to block off that AZEC board, but everywhere that steep slope roof is, everywhere the shingle roof will be, it'll be continuously vented. So we get to our ratio 1 to 150 on this, which is ideal. Typically, a lot of residential buildings, we can't because there's too much architectural detail on the front of a building, and you don't have any soffit. In your case, we have a soffit all the way around it. So that will, that's a big benefit on this type of building. We had the same thing in Carroll Stream. We got to do all that. You won't even know it's there.
Yeah,
It's invisible.
okay. And is it required to have 2 rows of that, or can?
So
you
I've
have-
got two, there's a bottom row by the soffit panel, and there's another row up. And the reason I've got both of those is to give myself support, because I gotta fasten my AZEC board through those into the existing fascia.
Okay,
So if I didn't do that, I'd have to put a block up there, and it'd have to be strips of wood or something, so I just put the venting in there, and that way I've got all the venting I need.
okay. And the vertical height of the new fascia board, do you know what that dimension is?
The total dimension on that, and I called out in the red, is 3.5 inches so it matches up with 2x4s. So 2x4 is 1.5 inches. I have 3 2x4s on the outside that I have to block it to my corners to hold this back. So it's a total of 3 inches of insulation, and then the wood sheathing, which is on top, I do 5/8, and I have a 1-inch gap. So it comes out to 1/8 inch off
Okay,
in the total. So it'll be a total of 6 inches, roughly.
6
So,
inches
no, I'm
thicker
talking
than
about
what
from-
it
Of
is now.
exposed. Yeah, so this, right now, this dimension right now is 6 inches. It's that much less. So its total thickness we're adding onto this is 4.
but in the new design, from the drip line all the way down to the bottom of the old fascia board, is that
It'll
like
increase by 2 inches.
is it like 14 inches?
The existing one there below the gutter, you have exposed 6 inches, and it's going to expose now 8.5 inches because we're going to a bigger, deeper gutter too. So the gutter is gonna change too in depth.
Okay,
So the only thing you're gonna see, that's the only thing you'll see, is a little bit more exposure. It's gonna go from this much to that much. It's gonna gain by about 2.5 inches
Okay.
total on the outside. It's not, those questions came up on the last couple projects we did, and when you're doing the project, it's like, oh my gosh.
yeah,
And then you're done, and you can't even tell it's changed, because everything went up that much, and the only thing changed is the amount of fascia board exposed on the outside. And with yours, it probably will be less evident because it's wrapped in a dark color metal, and the gutters are dark colored metal. When it was white with dark colored metal as their gutter trough, that's what Carroll Stream had, you notice the white, it's more white.
yeah.
But your building's actually a lot easier than theirs was, by the way. Theirs was quite the mess because they had soffits that were, in some cases, 12 feet deep at the front entry. They had these big recesses, unconditioned space, so we had to do ice and water seals up all the way around all of those back to where that interior wall was. So we ended up doing 7 rows of ice and water shield, 21 feet of ice and water shield up those areas.
Wow.
Matt?
So that was my only question, is
Yeah,
whether it would be possible to layer, like have a subfascia and then layer it to
It'll be
kind of
a
mitigate.
little bit bigger. It'll literally be that much thicker.
Yeah,
That's the perimeter edge. So and that's why I brought this 2-inch layer. That's how much more is gonna be there of fascia.
Okay.
But 1 inch of it, that much of it, will not be exposed because I'm putting a 7-inch gutter instead of a 6-inch gutter on there. So it eats up 1 inch of that. And the 7-inch gutter is what it should have anyway because of the trees and the rains we get anymore, the 100-year rain that happens every 3 years. I'm getting tired of those, by the way. But 6-inch gutters are required on your building. A 7-inch is just that extra safety factor. And the cost is virtually nothing.
So I'm just a little confused on the overall height of the fascia, because if I look at what you designate as 4.6-inch thickness, right? That red dimension line.
Yes.
So you scale that, there's, it looks like there's 18 inches of exposed fascia then. Are you off scale then with everything else?
Oh, what was there, or what is there? I have that actually in a photo. Maybe I can pull that out real quick. That's why I bring reading glasses with me. I found the picture
know the
already.
feeling.
Yeah.
All right. The gutters are 6-inch gutters. The picture of fascia. All right. Here's what's exposed below the gutter right now, is 6 inches.
Okay,
Okay, so this drawing is a little off.
not scaled.
Yeah, I put dimensions on it. I mean, it's not scaled, but this dimension, so from the gutter down,
Yeah.
will be increased by 3.5 inches.
Okay, so your fascia total is gonna be,
But this won't change. This
Yeah.
line won't change. It
Yeah.
goes up.
I'm just a little concerned about this. If I scaled it the way you had it, this is about 18 inches. If I take there's four
Yeah,
of
I
those.
didn't scale it on this.
Okay, I just wanna make sure, because AZAC doesn't come that tall in
No,
a
12 inches
12
wide,
inch,
yeah.
okay.
Well, actually, they have a 16. But here's your existing, that's your gutter depth right there. It's 5.
Yep.
That's gonna increase to 6.
Yeah.
So that changes that a little bit. It eats up some of that visible space. And again, it's in dark
Yeah,
colors.
I wasn't concerned so much about the aesthetics as just,
The
when I
scale.
scaled this, it
Yeah.
seemed like I don't see an 18-inch AZAC piece out there. But
No.
if it's scaled differently, then that's fine. I just wanted to make sure.
And we will be using AZEK on it.
Yeah.
So,
And have you had any issues with securing the gutter directly just into the AZEK and not into
goes
anything
back
else?
into the framing.
Oh, it will go into the framing? Okay.
No, the AZEK itself is
Yeah, it's a non-support.
relatively
Yeah,
non-structural.
I know, I use it a lot, so I know never to.
5/4 inch and
Yeah,
it
right.
doesn't hold much.
No, right, and I have it on my house,
Yeah.
always concerned with, and even like the overheating of it, because it will,
Expands and contracts.
It
Now,
expands.
understand, this is gonna be clad in metal.
Right,
So
exactly.
you're never
So
gonna
it's-
see the seams.
Yeah, right.
Carroll Stream left theirs exposed.
Yeah.
And they didn't wanna paint it, they left it white. You gotta really be careful detailing what time of the year you do it, because it expands and contracts a lot.
for sure, yep,
It moves around.
yep.
It's vinyl.
And then I think the only other thing is, I don't know how many people are gonna look at the soffit, but we would want to make sure that our soffit with those plugs, that doesn't, we're gonna spend a lot of money doing this that you're not even gonna see. And to do the one thing that is pretty exposed, I think we need to put some thought into how we deal with that. Plugging
And
out those vents.
Mike and I talked about it, he said, well, let's just put caps over everything that's there.
Yeah,
That's my detail for a cap.
Yeah.
I will be blunt, I'm not in support of that.
yeah,
I'd like to see it aesthetically finished off better than that.
Yeah.
Aluminum's great. It does look different than what you have there. Right now, basically, it's a plywood soffit.
But that is got, if I remember right, that's cement plaster.
It might be plaster, yeah. It could very well be, yeah.
And, you know, it's.
I can't remember for sure because I did look it up, but at some point I looked it up and I go, end of the day, this is your chance to change it. You don't have to. All I got to do is close off those vents. And that could be a project for some other time. I'm just thinking at this time, if you wanted to upgrade that look and make it maintenance-free, interlocking aluminum soffit panels are really easy to do.
That's the
But
last
they
thing I
change it
wanna do
completely.
there.
And the other thing is you can retrofit all with James Hardy. The problem with Hardy, every 8 feet, I'm gonna have a seam, then I'm gonna caulk. And you have to paint it.
Now, are those bonded? Is the metal bonded to that
No,
AZAC? So
no,
what's gonna
it's
keep it from-
actually, it's fastened at the top, so it's gonna clip around the bottom. It's gonna cleat around this piece at the bottom and hook onto it.
Okay.
Then the top is gonna come straight up and we're fastened with stainless steel ring shanks up at the top behind the gutter. So you'll never see, and then every lap is caulked in but overlapped. And
So
the
how
metal-
often
the metal
is
will be
that?
right formed on site.
What's the length of the metal sheet before you have a seam, vertical seam?
I would say it's gonna be the same as a gutter, so it could be 16 to 20 feet between seams. You know, it depends. I mean, you don't have a lot of intricacy to that building. We try to go continuous lengths wherever we can. But there's also the fact that you've got to allow for expansion and contracting, otherwise you get oil canning.
Ed?
I think these guys hit all the questions I had, so.
Neil?
We're supposed to be looking at the design of it, but if I was sitting on, I'm expecting the village board, when they looked at it, they're gonna be looking at the cost of the whole thing. And so I wonder, personally, I don't like options 3 or 4 that you listed, Mike, but I do like option 1, and, but I think option 2 might also work, and I just wonder, what's the overall cost of option 1 versus option 2?
Option 2 being closed cell foam, option 1 being your design.
Option 2 is spray foam.
Yeah, right.
So the problem with that, and Mike and I talked, that was Mike's original thing, can we do this? I said, you can do, it's your money. The problem with the option 2 is that spray foam, you have to take the lace ceiling out, more or less.
Yeah,
Guy-
you mentioned that earlier. The
And
question
then you're
was,
gonna have
what's
to take down the existing insulation.
Yeah, the question was, what's it cost?
Oh, that's a tough one to answer, only because we haven't bid it out. We did one down the city a couple of years ago, where we had dropped the drywall out and do that, insulate the underside of everything, and $10 a foot.
Versus this?
Yeah, which is about, with all this, you're probably gonna be in around, the insulation's about $5 a foot, so about twice the cost for spray foam on the underside, and that's just the insulation itself. Labor's tough to figure on that on the inside because it's a complicated building from that side. From the top side, it's an easy building. From the underside, I mean, I've been through that building, and you got a lot of stuff underneath there. You got ductwork and all kinds of stuff inside that attic space that people will have to work around. And the other thing you have to consider on this, and this is the thing that a contractor has to consider, anybody working in that space, you're either gonna be on a scaffold or you're gonna have to be harnessed in, working off ladders. I mean, it's going to be tough to work inside a closed space like that. And they've all got to be suited up with respirators because they can't breathe any of this stuff while they're doing it. So and there's a 3-day no re-entry period after it's sprayed from all the manufacturers because they want it to completely outgas.
So you're looking at $10 a foot for the spray foam option.
Just the material
$20
alone.
Plus or minus $20 for the whole thing.
Oh, yeah.
And doing this, you think this will last how many years? I thought you said.
That'll last indefinitely if we do it right. The decking will, yeah. Because once we've changed the dynamics of that building, the only thing you're going to replace is the shingles from now on. And the shingles, 30-year lifespan.
So who does this?
So the contractors we work with, first off, because you're a public entity, it's got to be prevailing wage. There's only a half a dozen shingle contractors that do prevailing wage in Chicago. And it's funny because Filato Roofing, nobody knows this about them. Chicago Public Schools think they get brand new shingle roofs from multiple different people. They don't. Jim Filato owns Filato Roofing. He's the only union scale shingle roofing contractor in Chicago. There's only one. So a lot of people sub out to him. So I can invite L. Marshall, I can invite Waukegan Roofing, they're all gonna go to Jim Filato and say, Jim, give me a bid for this.
Yeah,
So,
but
which is,
prevailing wage, they just have to pay the prevailing wage.
Yep.
They don't have to use union workers.
Nope.
It doesn't have to be a union
no.
shop.
So it's a very interesting scenario. I mean, I've been asked that. So Carroll Stream was CSR, Cairo Sons Roofing did theirs. Second bid on that was Jay Pine Roofing, and he was using Filato. Third roofer was Knickerbocker, he was using Filato. So with these other guys, what they do, they'll bid it and they'll change their markup on it. So I'm just being honest with you, this is what exists out there on shingle roofing. CSR did a phenomenal job. They're a non-union contractor, one of the few that does public work still. And you know, Mario Cairo and Pete Cairo own the company. Good people to work with. He was the one that delivered the samples up here. And I have no relationship to these guys. I'm just saying that they're competitive. They do their job. F&G Roofing, Mike Fagora says he'll do it. I've already talked to him about it. And DCG Roofing, which is another one, Dominic Dunlap owns that one. He also says he'll do a shingle roof like this. This is not a standard shingle roof like you'd do out on a house. So this isn't somebody to go to that would do that for you, even if you had a good friend that did it. This is completely different because it's really building a whole new roof assembly, not just putting shingles on something.
Well, I know when I put roofs on, we buy a roof that's supposed to be 30 years or 40 years. I plan on replacing it in 20 because they never last that long. So your one would last, option two probably last 20, 25 years.
Right.
But your option is forever.
Well, and that's
That's a big
the
difference.
design side of this. I mean, I say forever, we've all been around long enough, nothing is forever. But the reality is that what we're doing is changing the design such that it is now a new attic space. I can tell you that the youth center over at DuPage County, I did that in 1997 or 8. So it's already, getting old, like me. But so that's the thing is that these systems all have evolved since the mid-90s. And we're seeing them perform still well 20 years later. I have the same type of system under metal roof systems at Morton Arboretum. We did that design with DLA Architects. They had massive condensation problems. I don't know if you've ever been in the War Museum there, but they have a waterfall in it. It rolls down a rock into a pond. The humidity levels, when you check it with a sling psychometer, are up around 85%. And they couldn't figure out why the roof was rotting out, sweating. When we took that roof off, every fastener holding down the metal roof panel had completely rusted away. It looked like razor edge sharp things. The panels weren't even hardly on the roof. We did this design out there with an air barrier system with actually 6 inches of insulation underneath it to get above our dew point. New metal roof system on it, took the gutters off. So you can't have ice and snow damage if you get rid of the gutters most cases, and put just the ice blocks on it and put a French drain system around the whole building. And that is over 10 years old. And it's been absolutely leak-free, condensation-free, no problems. So it's not, and I know I told Mike this a couple of times, this is not my first rodeo on this. We've dealt with condensation in buildings. The worst I told Mike about was Material Sciences Corporation in Elk Grove Village. They fought with me about their design of wanting to retrofit a metal roof over a flat roof system. They wash gigantic steel coils. So their relative humidity, again, is up 80, 90% near the roof. They, in their infinite wisdom, decided to vent their interior space into the attic space above this after they put the metal roof on. We put a vapor barrier down at the bottom in the attic floor level. I walked in there about 7 years ago. You had to have boots on. There was a foot of water standing on top of the rubber EPDM membrane from the sweating coming off the metal roof above. It was one of the most frightening that we put drains in the ceiling to get the water out. So dew point is a big thing. And I was at a project downtown with sprayed polyurethane foam, solid between interior drywall and the exterior roof sheathing, and 4 inches of insulation on top of that. The only piece of vapor barrier was here, and it was a synthetic shingle roofing felt, was all. We opened it up, it's 2 years old, it's in litigation, totally 100% saturated in the top, and the deck is already rotting out. So it's Icynene foam, polyurethane foams, all these foams, which are going to be a standard in the industry. They're gonna replace all your fiberglass bat stuff. Super, super careful about making sure they get airflow on the warm side. If you don't get it, you will have massive problems because they're not air impermeable. They're close, but they're not. And the contract, well, actually the lawyer down there said, what do you mean? I said, here's a 4-inch block of foam sprayed to the underside of that. Airtight, right? Put it to your mouth. Close the sides. You can breathe through it. I said, these are not airtight. They're air barriers. And they're like Tyvek. You know, those are, they allow air to transfer through them. The problem is that's in the old building drying mentality. The problem is our buildings, environments inside are not designed to have a drying mentality to the inside or the outside anymore. We're building them airtight. You're building a sealed jar. So it's gotten a lot tougher. Building science has gotten a lot tougher in the last 5 years because of guys like Mike, because they love building codes.
The concern I get on it is that we've had instances before, and I'm thinking of the railroad station when that was re-roofed, that we come up with a recommendation and then the village board goes with the cheaper one. And, you know, we may very well today recommend this, but I'm concerned about what the village board will do.
There's always cheaper options. There's always
Well,
cheaper options.
As far as I know, there's only one option for the board. I mean, the vote of the board is going to be, go with this system, or don't go with something else, which, who knows what that's gonna be.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I mean, here's what, if I sat on the finance side of it, I'd say, well, why don't we just tear the roof off and put another roof on? What's wrong with the one that's there? The ice and snow damming doesn't change. The thermal resistance inside the building doesn't change. And with a new energy code, which I'm sure Mike can quote, the new energy codes on these buildings is gonna get much more extreme yet, much more. Exterior walls are gonna have to be R23s, roofs are gonna have to be in residential R60, which is almost impossible. And commercial buildings are gonna R40. So it's getting tougher. So to take the same building and get to that new R value to meet your new energy codes, which have already been internationally adopted in the United States, haven't been adopted locally yet, add 2 more inches of ISO to that from the top side. Now your fascia board does really get big. So my suggestion is sooner than later, get on the game, get this one done, and walk away for 30 years. Because then I can retire.
Art, what do you think?
You know, I guess I agree with you. I kind of like the spray foam option, but the little bit I know about insulations and vapor barriers and so on and so forth, that, you know, spray foam seems to have some real advantages. Now, I take it you're an expert and, you know, you say it's not a good system, but,
Spray foam has massive advantages from an insulating standpoint, has no advantages from performance. And the only reason it has
and as I
insulative
say,
advantages.
spray foam's not an option.
That's a
So-
lay-in ceiling, most of it.
I beg your pardon?
It's all a lay-in ceiling, 2x2 lay-in ceiling. With all the ductwork up there. I'm not trying to sell this, but I'm just telling you my memory of, you know, 25 years ago or whatever it was, probably 40 years ago.
Yeah, there's a lot of pipes and a lot of ductwork. filled
There's a
with
ton of
that.
stuff up there.
You know, I'm not, as I say, it seems to me that
But you
the
have
train's
to-
left the station here.
Right.
Yeah, I think that
so-
you're taking the building apart, taking the ceiling out and doing all the things you have to do before you even begin to spray it.
Right, yeah,
This
no
is-
question about it,
Is
yeah.
pretty damn costly.
Yeah.
What's the insulation now in the building? Is it
Just bats.
Just bats sitting on top of
Can you
the,
say it was R13?
It's a 6-inch fiberglass bat under the roof deck with aluminum face on it, and there's a nailer strip on the trusses, so it's nailed up with just a small air gap between the back of the bat and the roof deck.
There are no vent
So at the
chutes.
top of the
yeah,
attic.
so
There's nothing.
There's
There's
no
no
air
baffles
gaps.
or?
Nothing.
Air baffles,
So when
no.
you
Well-
look out over these soffit areas right now, which I open them up, you pull up the ceiling, you look out, and there's the vent. All it's doing is letting cold air into the living space. That's the only thing it's accomplishing. It's not venting to the attic, ridge vent, nothing. There's no venting at all. They didn't even put vent chutes in.
would you be taking out the old insulation
Nope.
and just relying on this?
Just
You
leave it
keep
there.
that,
What's the R value of that?
Of this total right here, 17.
17.
17, and there's
We
probably.
get about
a
13 inside, so you're
R21
gonna
in
right
there,
around that
right?
R30.
Yeah.
So you add the
still not-
together,
Somewhere
you add
between
it.
13 and 19, probably for the 6-inch bats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're still not really even getting to the current requirement with.
Yeah, remember, this thing was done in 84.
No, yeah.
Right, yeah.
We're not judging, I'm just curious.
No,
Have you guys, Scott
Nobody
or
wants it.
Matt, have you guys used a system like this before?
No, I'm not.
No, I mean, trying to think of any.
Well, the only place you do, you're in residential construction?
Residential, yeah.
The only place you do it is on a vaulted, closed, compact vaulted ceiling.
Yeah.
Where you had a big problem with ice and snow damming at the outside or overhang. That's it, and I've seen it used there.
Well, and what I've done, which I don't know if, is they have this continuous, kind of a continuous ridge vent, but it's not at the ridge, it's like at the halfway point.
Yep.
So you get another kind of venting halfway up in a cathedral
Yep.
ceiling system,
DCI vents.
is what I've done, yeah.
Yeah.
But
The only thing that I had that was ever comparable to this is structural insulated panels.
Yeah.
Where, you know, they got the sandwich and then they put strips on top, to create a ventilated deck.
Are you using this for residential too, or is this,
I've had to.
yeah, with the spray foam, like coming back to fix the spray
The
foam situation?
problem, no, it's old, buildings in the 1990s especially.
Yeah.
And I'll pick on some places, Long Grove, one in particular, where you have massively steep slope,
Yeah.
all closed compact, no way to vent them at all. And we pull the fascia board off, we put this on over the top of it, and we get rid of the ice and snow damming.
Yeah, okay,
Because those things, a lot of them, they pack the insulation in there,
yeah,
and they use 2x4 framing
yeah, right.
for the roof trusses.
I mean,
Well, how much
we
R value are you gonna
budgeted
get?
For this.
Nowhere near you need to be,
Yeah,
where
you
you
always
need to
get
be.
that compressed area.
Yep.
It's been a year, it's been a year since we talked about it, yeah, right,
All right.
yep.
Well, I feel like we should get some CEU credits for tonight. So thank you for that. It's been a good,
Well, I enjoyed your restaurant across the way here, Maybe's.
yeah,
It's a great place.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, good, good,
Yeah.
yeah,
Brisket sandwich is off the chart.
yeah.
yeah, right.
So what's everybody think? I mean, my concern from when Mike brought it up last month was the depth of the fascia. And I thought it was more than that.
Yeah.
And I was envisioning just metal panel doing this without backing or anything.
So to avoid that, and I will look at the exact dimension that'll be exposed to heat, because it's cold, it's not a real issue, the heat is. If we have to do a break form in it, a striation in it, that would be right at the same level as the gutter, and it gives us a reinforcement break in it. It's like a little V. And it would occur right there, wouldn't be visible, but what it does, it's a stiffener.
Well, you know what, you could do it below the gutter and they give it
You could give it an architectural relief there. Right.
something other than a flat panel.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, I mean,
It's just a flat panel now, but I don't,
we have to do that all the time on buildings downtown where we have big stone pieces that we're cladding or something. We'll put metal over top of some of that stuff and you can,
so is Rosenau Roofing still around?
no, that's Kimbrell, I'm sorry. Rosenau left a long time ago. Rosenau left before Kimbrell Roofing bought out some of their assets and then they left. Ridderford Roofing's still down there, but they're gone. So some of the big guys are gone. And they got away from, used to be, they had those big ass tanker trucks with asphalt in and tar. I don't see any of those anymore. They don't exist. Everything's single ply rubber roofs and thermoplastic roofs now. And with the heat reflectivity or light reflectivity, white roofs took over the market. And so it's either a coated modified membrane or a single ply white system. And the market's changed. I'm trying to evolve to it. But I love the older systems and they don't exist anymore. And coal tar pitch, some of us may remember that. You used to even get that and seal your driveways with it. It's got benzene in it, it's a carcinogen, and a lot of people died using it from cancer. So it doesn't exist. That was Copper's Industry and Allied Industries right here in Chicago. Two of our big firms that were doing that. So, and because we had the steel mills too.
So you're going with a 7-inch gutter?
What's that?
7-inch gutter? You said the gutter was gonna be 7 inches.
7-inch gutter. 7-inch is the back piece. The front measures 6, the bottom measures 5.5.
Okay.
And you have 6 inches, which is 6-inch back, 5-inch front, 4.5-inch trough right now. The increase in volume, for every inch of increase in size in a gutter, you gain about 1,000 gallons of water runoff capacity in a heavy rain. So you literally won't flood this gutter ever. Now, I do not spec gutter guards on these things. If you have a leaf problem over there, and you guys would know, if they fill up with leaves and you're having to clean them out, the extra size will help. We're going to 4x6 downspouts. Right now, you've got 3x4s on there, so we'll go 4x6s. It'll help the leaves wash out. But if you've got a really bad problem with leaves and you're underneath a lot of trees there, I'm a board president over in Michigan on our board, and we just fought with the oak trees too much. I finally conceded and we put gutter guards on.
Do
And,
you have leaf problems?
No, they don't seem to be too bad over there. There are a couple trees on the
In the public
east
works
end-
side.
Yeah, on the east end of the building
Yeah.
there. There's a couple trees
any of these
over it, but it doesn't seem like it's causing too much of a problem.
I just bring it up because this time of the year, people will say, you know, I'll see heaps of leaf on a roof, and I go,
And the only
including my own building.
concern, the existing one, the only concern I have is that
But they can be added afterwards. It's not
Yeah.
it's already big.
not something you have to do now.
Well, guys, what do you think? I'm okay with it. You guys aren't.
No, I am. I don't see an option, and as they say, you know, we're kind of presented here with fait accompli to a certain extent. You know, to my eye, the fascia's already a little big on the building, and, you know, you're increasing that. That's not gonna be a positive in my view, but it's probably not a deal killer either.
It isn't for me.
No.
How about you, Ed? Neil?
You designed the building. If it's not a deal killer for you,
Well, I thought it was gonna be a lot bigger, and I think if we
then
can
it's
put a
not a deal
crease,
killer for me.
you know, some sort of a detail, you know,
Yeah.
like 4 inches
If
up
he
from the
does this-
bottom or something.
Can I ask a question just to beat this into the ground? Would it be possible to layer the fascia? So if you had a sub fascia, then you're venting, and then another fascia? So you kind of break it up
You
into two
could,
parts?
you could, yeah,
So you kind of step it a little bit?
yeah. No, that's definitely possible. That would be a much different look than you have now, but
Probably
it's
more
absolutely
expensive
doable.
Detail, yeah.
But
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
talking
just
about a
two layer, I'd put the first layer of AZEK in there tight against the existing fascia,
Yeah,
wrap that with metal,
then the venting.
vent it, then put a secondary layer of AZEK to the outside.
Yeah.
That's a LZAC.
And that reduces the size of each piece of metal.
That's a LZAC, right?
AZAC,
AZEK,
AZEK,
it's
yeah.
PVC.
yeah. But it's expensive, that material's expensive.
It's all the way around the
I mean,
building,
to-
except for the fire
to-
department.
There's other ones, there's other materials out there, as
yeah,
you know,
I've-
and they're half the density.
Yeah.
And I go, if you're gonna do this,
Yeah, no,
why would you save $1 a linear foot
yeah,
to put something up that lasts potentially half as long?
yeah, no,
Because when this thing's done, it's a submarine.
yeah.
Yeah.
But if you wanted to do 2 layers of that, that's a good question and a valid question. I was really working on not changing the appearance, but there's advantages to doing that because I reduced that sheet metal size.
Yeah.
But it doubles the cost of that perimeter fascia
That
piece.
perimeter piece,
Yeah.
yeah.
Which is,
It'd be interesting to know how much, over the whole cost.
We could bid it out both ways. That's possible, and have that as an option and give that as an alternate. I would guess on your building, you're probably looking at 15,000, maybe 20,000 additional cost. Not insignificant.
Yeah.
call that the straight off tax increase.
Well, I don't pay taxes here.
Just gonna put
Rare
that out
rare
there.
jobs that I get in
Yeah.
Bloomingdale.
But I would second what Scott's saying. I think that would be a good idea to get that relief.
Yeah.
It's gonna stick out in front of the plane behind it, probably close to 2 inches. So that's gonna create a nice shadow
That
line.
would be okay, but, you know, if you guys are worried about money.
Well,
No, that was
We're
what
not
I
worried about
mentioned
money.
last year.
We're architects.
Whatever it was.
You guys became the architects on that one. I'll concede to you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would take that as an alternate, though. I think that's a good idea.
I mean, at the end of the day, the board's gotta decide how much they're willing to spend, so.
Well,
And it might be worthwhile to put up a sample, just to look and see what, because if it's all in a shadow, it doesn't really matter, but,
Yeah.
It's all dark.
I don't know if 15,000 is worth 4 inches, or if that's our increase.
And pay our salary
Yeah.
for doing this.
You can
I
make
think
that
you're gonna have
decision
a-
after you get the bids.
I think you're gonna have a foot exposed, but if, basically.
Yeah, I would like to see this, and I don't know if the board is gonna judge this on aesthetics or just numbers. Because they're not gonna appreciate that the scale here isn't exactly the scale
Numbers all day.
out
I
there.
know the answer to your question.
Yeah, I know, but,
Numbers.
yeah.
But if it's in the realm of what Mike has got budgeted for
Always
next
gonna
year,
look at it and say, like he just
then
said.
it's not our issue.
"Oh,
Yeah,
tax
no.
increase."
Yeah, I'm all for it.
Because
if
there's lots
that's-
of things that we do that we
Oh, yeah.
never talk about how much it costs, or
I
when we.
I think
have
what
people
Scott's
do
suggesting is a good idea. It'll break that distance, it catches a nice shadow. I
Yep.
think Arthur was pointing that out too. I think that's a good idea if it's manageable dollar-wise. And I don't think it's a drastic,
No, It's,
I don't know what the whole project costs, but I mean, what's the percentage? That's
But
really,
I would almost wanna see that money spent on the soffit issue.
Well,
I don't know
underneath.
what, the-
That's-
that cement
let's do
plaster
both.
has been there.
But I mean, if we
For
plug
40
it, are you gonna
years.
plug it and
And
then
you plug it with a simple thing. How often are they? They're not that often.
They're
those
not,
vents?
no.
Oh, they're not?
Like maybe every 4 feet
They
or
circle,
something?
they're circles like every
Yeah.
No, they're
20
rectangular.
rectangles. They're
Rectangular
like-
vents every. about
They're a little
4
square,
feet or so.
they're square.
So you
Yeah,
just pop
square.
those things out and put a cap in its place.
That's what I drew there. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what's gonna be visible, not gonna be pretty, because you're gonna have a cap, and they're not very frequent, by the way. They're about 8 feet on center.
So now they're 8 feet, yeah, which is an issue. Which is, yeah, so it's not that bad, I guess.
But like I said, this is, I
I really don't want to do the whole soft.
bring a sample
Yeah.
of it, but.
Perfectly good material, and you screw it up with something crappy.
Yeah.
But can we I mean, if that's, I mean, is there a way to do that nicely, or is it just a cap? Is that the easiest thing to do?
well, you could make something like out of that AZAC with a chamfered edge on it and so forth and work out a spacing. So maybe you had to put it
Can you
dummy
just
every
close
so
it off
often,
from the
like shape
inside,
it,
so it still
so
looks
it's
like an edge?
uniform and,
Yeah, right.
looks like somebody.
But it's available in white,
Thought
Yeah.
into it.
Right.
whatever.
You just close it off from the inside so it still looks like.
That's
a
what I'm
vent.
doing there, is I'm closing it and then
Oh.
just putting a cap on back. I can put the vent back on it even.
Oh, okay.
The vent can still stay looking like a vent.
So just, yeah, I mean, that I think,
Yeah, so the appearance stays the same.
Yeah.
We
The
keep
appearance
same
stays the
vent.
same.
That
All
makes
it matters
sense.
whether there's air
Seal
going
from the
through it or not.
inside,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, that changes the appearance to zero at that point.
that's what,
Right,
yeah,
yeah.
that makes sense. Instead of,
All I do is just stick a piece of plywood up there, put a
Yeah.
bead of sealant around it,
Yeah.
pull it down with a screw, and then
Right.
put the vent back
yeah,
in.
that makes sense.
That's what I would do.
Perfect
Yeah, okay.
for me.
That's the cheapest way to do
Yeah,
it.
great,
Yeah.
great.
And nobody can really complain about you having changed anything.
And
Right,
Right.
yeah.
Nobody has asked me in the last 40 years, why did you do those vents?
Yeah, what's with those square vents?
Yeah,
Bob?
and somebody who tried to do, why the vents are all plugged?
Yeah.
Some of my
I won't
clients
know
would
that
ask me
either.
that, that's for sure.
Does this skinny little vent that's your continuous vent?
Yes,
Does that ever attract spiders and spider webs, and spiders
It-
tend to
good question, and
close up?
it,
I mean,
so Coravent is the manufacturer of this. They've been doing this for, geez, almost as long as I've been doing, 20-plus years. And this vent size is the same thing we're using polymer mesh vent weeps in masonry. They're sized so that wasps don't want to get into them, bees don't want to get into them. It's just, they came up with a cell size on this thing that, I get that question a lot of times, and bugs don't like them. Now, spiders, maybe, but even, because it's cross-meshed as well. It's not a singular hole all the way through. It's literally a web
It's got a
mesh.
screen in it.
It's like a screen.
Okay.
But think of a multiple layered screen going different directions as you're going through this thing. I've never seen birds can't get into them, bugs don't seem to bother them, and I literally have looked, and they don't.
I'm familiar with the product, and I think it's a pretty good product. What it looks like, at least if it hasn't changed, if you imagine a thick piece of cardboard
Yep.
sliced and it's corrugated,
Yep.
only it's plastic, not paper. So, it
air
creates
can
all
blow
these
through
little,
Okay, yeah.
these little air passages through it. And, and you look at it up, you can kind of see the bottom of it, but it's all dark and, you know.
We'll go through all of this, and people will walk by the building and not have any clue that anything's ever been done.
True. Right.
Yeah,
You got it.
Except us.
yeah. But my question is, if we do the options, are those options going to the board, and they're just gonna pick the one that's the cheapest option
I don't think
anyways?
you do the options. I think-
Well,
Well, that's what I'm saying, well, so we're not doing the stacked option, the sub fascia, is
No,
what I'm
that's-
saying.
That's something that we can take as an alternate.
But is that going to the board as an alternate, or is that coming back?
Well, whatever you guys want. I
Yeah.
mean, we could bring it back here for you guys to make a recommendation on it if you want.
I think
Or-
we could
or I could just
tell the
talk to you
board this is an
informally, or-
alternate to
Yeah,
break up the,
Right.
Yeah, okay.
But
We'd
yeah,
like
it's,
to do it,
however
but
you guys
it's-
wanna do it. Then we also have two shingle samples. To my left, the driftwood is the closest to the existing, and to my right, which is actually my favorite, is that Golden Harvest has a little more red to it, which I think goes well with the red brick out there, and a little more variation in
yeah,
color to
we
it.
take it outside, it really was different.
Yeah,
Yeah, you like the Golden Harvest?
I
when you
did
saw
when I took
outside?
it outside, yeah.
yeah.
And performance-wise, they're virtually identical. I mean, I can't say, but these two companies compete literally to the penny and to the design.
Yeah.
But
They don't have that nail strip like this one
take
does.
these outside and stand by the building, or look at the building.
That's
We'll literally
Yeah.
do that
Yeah,
and get a visual on it.
Does the tab size vary on those, on that one? The tab size, the width of the tabs?
They're virtually identical. They're,
No, I meant just within that color range. I'm having trouble.
and it's,
So you have this size, and then this,
and then these are the smaller overlays.
right.
So, a little explanation about an architectural laminate. You guys probably all remember 3 tabs, where it was just one continuous strip and had little slots in it. Imagine now a continuous, what was a starter shingle, which was solid, and then they adhere these over the top. The advantage is that this is really a 2-layered shingle. The top line Ultra and this, those tabs completely overlay, so you have 2 layers everywhere. So hail damage, when I hear people try to do hail claims on this stuff, you've probably heard this too. You pretty much won't get it. You have people claiming it. I've been on a lot of hail damage jobs, and I can tell you on architectural laminates, I could take a ball peen hammer and hit that thing and you won't even dent it. And so that's the other thing, is that super good hail resistance, branch resistance, wind resistance. Wind uplifts on these are 130 mile per hour. So that's higher than hopefully you'll ever have to see here. They're hurricane resistant. The evolution of shingles has come quite a ways, and the reason was that we went into these much steeper sloped roofs. You won't think a steeper sloped roof has a bigger wind load on it. When you look at this, when that wind hits this way, it's deflecting up. And when it deflects up, it tries to lift those shingles. And so it used to be 3 tabs that fail all the time there. In the architectural laminates, the adhesive has changed on them, the nailing strips have changed on them, the amount of nails have changed on them. The unfortunate part is the weight of the shingle continues to go down instead of up, because there's asphalt's inexpensive product going into that, and it's oil-based. And right now I can tell you, I had somebody ask me, what's a shingle roof cost now on a residential home? About $10 a square foot. That's up 25% over what it was 5 years ago. So if you can do a shingle roof, do it now.
Well, cedar's even worse, so.
Oh, cedar's the same, if you can even get it.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah,
bad
exactly.
wood.
I would say, the wood is so poor quality
It's
at this point.
Not old growth, it's
Yeah,
awful.
I wouldn't even recommend
No,
one.
Yeah. Yeah,
And that's same with cedar siding.
yeah. no,
Just don't do it anymore.
No.
yeah.
okay, let's decide what we're doing here, guys.
What's our charge here, Mike?
Well, to make a recommendation on the appearance change of the, although the village definitely appreciates your expertise on the technical side of it too, but really the charge to the ABR is the appearance review approval. for the appearance change.
And then if we make a motion, are we including, my concern is if we add a second option, I don't know what they're gonna vote, you know.
Well, I mean, we can do it however you want. If you want the second option to come back either here formally for recommendation or informally to bring it to Bob or you guys for
What is the second
your
option?
thought, the stepped.
The stepped fascia.
I think that just
Here, I
goes on as
sketched
an
We just do that as
alternate.
an alternate.
Yeah, right.
Just use it as an alternate, and you can say, you know,
Okay.
we'd like to do
Yeah, I
that
like
as an alternate.
Yeah.
What are you showing there?
He
I
did
I doodled.
Yeah.
a doodle, yeah, perfect. Now it's in the record.
But that might all
Yeah, okay.
just be in a shadow.
Exhibit
In the
A.
bid documents.
Straight up tax increase, Exhibit A.
Yeah, that's nice.
I think as long as this fits, well, the village board is gonna okay for it going out to bid, and then the rubber will hit the road when the bids come back in, then we'll see where we're at.
Yeah, right.
I think what we would want to do is recommend that
They
they
s-
get a bid option for the stepped
Right.
fascia, and then ultimately that decision.
And
Would
then
you be
face-
able to have that for the village board, a drawing of the stepped option?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I mean, I can do that. The reality is that we also have to get past the cost side of that to them.
Right.
So,
right.
And I can't speak to that most days. I try to, but I can't. I just go, villages sometimes do irrational things.
We're
That's
very good.
normal.
I mean, they're usually pretty good about following the recommendation that comes from this body, actually.
Actually, they always have,
Yeah, right,
That-
right, yeah, yeah,
but it's usually not out of their pocket.
right,
All the streetscape stuff was, and
right.
Yeah. Yeah, I just don't, are we saying that that when this goes out for bid, there's gonna be option A and option B out for bid?
option B is with
The stepped,
the step.
okay, so
Yeah.
we're gonna recommend two options
Right,
out of this meeting.
You're
today.
recommending the system,
Approval of the system.
the approval
Right,
of the
yeah.
system.
You need to recommend the system, and then their base bid will be a continuous
Yep,
one-piece
right.
fascia
okay,
board, alternate to a two-piece fascia board.
Two-piece fascia board, right.
Okay.
And like I said, we'd put that in the bid documents. I mean, we have stuff like that all the time and stuff. You know, right down to
Richard, what's the linear?
total linear feet around the thing. I have that.
do you remember what we were talking about for total cost for the sloped roof, Phil? I don't, I know we put
looked
in
that
the
up,
budget
too.
what you were recommending.
Answer
but I
one
don't
at
know.
a time here. All right.
I don't
The
remember.
total linear feet of edge is 1,215.4 feet.
Wow,
That's the wonderful thing about roof scope.
it's not a feat.
Yeah,
And AZEC is about what?
It does
$9
it
a
better
foot?
than I do.
Yeah,
Crazy.
AZEC is, yeah, I just did my 3 seasons room in AZEC, and it's,
So if you figure 750, that's probably low per linear foot installing.
yeah,
You know, I'd say it's probably gonna be closer to 10.
Yeah.
And that's, you figure that out really quick, it's 10 times that's $12,000, $13,000 of material and installation.
yeah, that's not, yeah.
It might be more.
And then if you double it with the thing, that's still not a huge.
And what is that what was the overall thinking on cost? of
The
this?
overall cost we estimated based on not the double fascia,
Right, obviously.
was, and I try not to go light on these when I'm doing these initially, but I also try not to and I'm, by the way, not percentage of project, so that's not how I get paid. It's a flat fee for what we do design-wise. Shingle roof. We have it budgeted at $19.50 a square foot, so it's $204,000, right at $205,000
okay.
For the whole thing.
for the whole thing.
That's not the fire department roof, you're not doing that.
That's
a minor.
No, that's just the,
separate.
that's just the
I just
shingle.
think we shouldn't even,
Shingled roof.
I say
Yeah,
we
our
forget this
205.
and just do this. I guess
We are
is
doing
what
the
I'm
fire
getting to.
department.
And I did
Why
give
have
you
an
an-
option
Included in the
if it's
205,
not
yeah.
a cost issue? If we feel it's just a better aesthetic
What's the
I would
total
almost go
cost?
the other way.
If that's
Why
just the
give them
shingles,
that
what's the
option?
total cost?
I mean, if we're here for.
That's for that part of it. Then if you do,
Seems like that's why it's negligible.
I gave you an upcharge for copper gutters. If you wanted to go back with copper
It's just
gutters, that was
frustrating that this
20,000
isn't
just
just
for the
get-
gutters.
No.
My base
How
number
much all that
included the gutters in there. Plywood sheathing, I estimated, 1,500 square feet of it. That's $12,750. I'm gonna not say mason repairs will pull that out.
The grand total is what?
The grand total on all of this was right at
Yeah.
250,000.
That's a third of the cost of the building.
Yeah,
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 it's like concrete.
yeah. Everything's changed since
Everything's
1989.
changed, yeah.
So you're talking about 5% of the projected cost increase.
I'm just wondering if we even, well, if we really want that stepped look, and I don't know if we do, like, why even have this flat as an option and just recommend the stepped and not, if it's pretty negligible cost to go to the
If
step.
it's out of 200 and some
Yeah,
thousand
I mean, that's
dollars,
like
it's
an-
another 15,000. that's
Right,
not
we
gonna-
make those decisions every day without worrying about it.
Yeah,
If we like that idea, which I think is a
I
good
think it's a
idea.
good idea.
Yeah.
And understanding the actual bids on these things may vary considerably.
Sure.
Ridgeworth Roofing is doing Palos Hills right now. We're doing their fire station. And Ridgeworth was $60,000 lower than the next bid. And next bid was L Marshall out of up here in Waukegan area. And Larry was like, how can he be $60,000 less than me? I said, well, Larry, you're $60,000 less than the guy next up above you. So the bids were like, and that project is a $500,000 project. So it went 500,000, 560, 600, 700, 800. I had two bids over $1 million. So it just, public work bid is interesting because prevailing wage is right now $105 an hour for a roofer. Sheet metal guy's 125. Yeah. And we can't get anybody to go in the trades.
Yeah.
It pays more than a lawyer gets.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
So when we get the bids, and again, emphasize that we're not percentage of projects. So what I'm trying to do is design the best system I can for your budget and for your design requirements. Longevity is important to me. My oldest son works for me. He's gonna be around for another 30 years doing this. I don't want it to fail in his time frame either. So we're trying to make sure that we're doing the best possible thing for every village. Village of Bloomingdale, I do a little bit of work there, and I saved them, I got them an insurance claim for $35,000 on their public works building that they didn't even know they had a claim on, had a wind and hail damage claim. And I said, go back, and the company was, they'd already ceased to do work with them back in 2012, went back and recaptured it. So I like working with villages because I get it. We're all taxpayers, and we're all trying to do the best we can and keep a good public face forward. So that's what I'm trying to do for you guys too. And we do a lot of work with villages.
I would be inclined to go along with what Matt said and do it the way we want it as the base bid.
Yeah, I don't,
You only get, if you take it away, you're gonna get a dime on the dollar, but
yeah.
Yeah.
You're just gonna give them an opportunity to save money, and then we're not, they're not gonna spend more money if we give them that cheaper option, I think,
Yeah.
is the issue.
Well, if you don't give them two options, you only give them the one option you really like,
That's what I'm saying.
they won't ever know.
I'd rather give them the one,
We do
because that's
now.
what we do all the time.
Well, and I say that's just like setting budgets. I mean, I've seen where Morton Arboretum was a classic on that one, and the budget was set at 1.6 million. And I said, well, it's not 1.6 million. It's gonna take probably about 900,000 is all this is gonna be. So they came in under budget and everybody, oh, this is wonderful. I said, no, they over budgeted. So I said, they weren't realistic in their budget. So, somehow they're rewarding people for making bad budgets. I try to hit my budgets pretty close. It's a little bit of a nebulous market right now, and that's the reality of it. Our prices just keep moving around on us.
okay, so what do we wanna do, you guys? Let's move on.
Make a
Somebody-
motion.
Are we approving the color or
Yeah,
just?
yeah, right, yeah, if you could include that
That
in the
looks like
motion.
it's about the color of what, that copper on the gutters, the only place the copper turned is on the roof.
That's dark bronze. I mean, that is
Yeah.
exactly the color of
Yeah.
this copper.
It turned on the roof of the tower, and that's green, but the rest of it never did.
Interesting.
Yeah, that is
So did you guys,
interesting,
you
isn't it?
said you liked the red in this one?
Yeah, in the Golden Harvest, yeah.
Yeah.
What, did you guys look at it?
I would defer to the
Yeah,
the original
and
architect.
as I say, I defer to you guys. You've seen them in the daylight and
They're very, very
so
similar.
forth.
Yeah, no, it has nice to have
Yeah.
all. But the train stations,
I have, the Village Hall and the train station are a different one. I actually have that sample in the other room if you want to see it. I forgot what it, forgot what it is.
oh, whether,
Yeah,
yeah.
weathered wood, which is Owens Corning, right? Or is that Gaff?
This is driftwood.
No, I mean, the weathered wood is a Gaff product or
GAF, Timberline?
GAF, yeah.
Should say Golden Harvest.
Yeah,
Yeah, right, yeah.
The weathered wood has a much more gray and yellow tone.
Mm-hmm.
It goes better with
Right.
greens and yellow sided stuff.
Is it on the back of that board?
It is, and it would be,
I have a board of the weathered wood if you
Yeah.
really want to see
I know
it.
it, I know
Although
it.
Yeah,
the
that's
board,
a-
I don't think
Yeah, I
it's
know,
actually
Yeah, that's a-
accurate.
yeah.
it's got a
Actual
golden
roof.
gray.
yeah, no, yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
that's kind of a go-to one for,
That is a very popular
Yeah.
color.
It is the most popular color.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's what we
By
usually,
far, like, it's
yeah.
like, that's what's on my building.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah.
But, you know, that doesn't, I mean, some of these.
I'm just curious, I don't see what we're
So
doing,
this
I'm just
is Golden
curious
Harvest you're looking
what
at,
we
that's
did.
weathered wood, so there's a pretty big disparity between those two.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which
They're,
is,
they're not even in the same color range. I mean, you're looking at that versus that. So you see how much red and yellow are in this, and this is much darker grays and yellows, and blues.
I'm liking this one.
But that's.
yeah, I do too,
think-
for sure, yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
I'm
Golden
not
Harvest.
too
Yeah.
sure, but this may be what you have up there now. I'm
Was
trying
that
to-
rewrote?
What's that one
It had to
called?
have been rewrote.
It was in 2005, yeah,
Yeah.
right.
I'm sure it's there, but it's certain, those, I can't tell you who shares it. Could be certain teams, you know? And everybody markets under a different name.
Okay.
All right,
Ed?
that's about all I can do.
Are you putting the pressure on me to make the motion?
It's been a while.
It has been a while. That's why I need to break in slowly. I'll let somebody else take
You're
it.
Mr. Motion.
I know, but I don't even know how, since we have an option,
Don't we have a drawing already of
Yeah,
what we're
first.
proposing?
We do, yeah.
Courtesy of Mr. Strata.
yeah.
Hand drawn.
You want me to
school.
pass it down? You can see it down there?
So, you're moving the vent up.
Yeah.
Moving the vent up, yeah, probably doing, I don't know if you would get two vents in that space behind the gutter, maybe, yeah.
I just, well, take a look and see, because Corvette only has it in so much height.
Yeah,
The depth is constant, the height, I think, is a maximum of 3 inches. I still may have to stack two of them on top of
yeah,
each other.
yeah,
I just won't have a gap between them.
yeah. Makes sense.
Oh, right, so well, what
You're just
Scott's
breaking
drawing
it.
here kind of suggests that the old fascia remain in place.
It will.
Or it would be a new version of the
Yeah, the
old
plane
fascia.
stays the same.
No,
Plank
but
will
what
stay
I'm
there.
saying is, but the material, could that just be reused? The existing fascia that's up there in Rapid? Because it's
It's not gonna
currently,
be tall enough.
it's,
That's gonna be my problem. I'm gonna
Gotta
be,
go up.
no, but if you do the step,
It could cover the old one.
you'll cover, all you've got to do is lap the top of the existing fascia and put the vent on.
I don't know that that'll work. That's the only thing.
It seemed to me that would
I
save
mean, it
some money.
should, but the thing is, I'm raising it 4 inches, so now I got a 4-inch gap here above that existing fascia. That's gonna be sitting out here. Then I've got my next, that wraps with metal. This metal up here has to attach to something. So I'd have to put blocking in there anyway. And by the time I get done screwing around with it all, if any of that fascia's rotted anyway,
Yeah.
I don't know that you're gonna save any money doing that.
Well, you know, that, as you say, that
The ASIC's
plastic-
expensive.
That ASIC wood is very expensive.
It is.
Doesn't matter. It either it can be done or it can't. I don't know.
Yeah, and I can't actually answer that question for you, standing here until I take a gutter section off.
But yes, that's precisely what I envisioned.
You want that?
I'll take, yeah. I'll send you a copy of this.
I think I got it, Mike.
Mark that as Exhibit A.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
right. Right.
Okay, motion man.
So,
You know, I think. just
Good.
to-
yeah, help me.
I don't think we have to detail the motion. So we recommend that as presented with this addition. That there's a-
Yep. I move to recommend the perimeter edge even gutter detail as submitted by Structural Technologies with one revision that we provide a step fascia with the venting at the forward fascia. And that we approve the, what color is it?
The Golden Harvest?
The Golden Harvest asphalt shingle for the new roofing
And
shingles.
the Midnight Bronze.
And the midnight bronze for all of our wrapped fascia components and gutter.
Second?
Second, third.
Okay, we have a second.
Right, roll call.
Okay, Member Cottrell,
Aye.
Member Dahlman,
Aye.
I had to,
Member Deegan,
Aye.
Member Kerouac,
Aye.
Member Stradiff,
Aye.
and Chair Hunter.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Welcome.
Thanks a lot.
Very
for your-
informative,
Yeah,
yeah,
no,
very,
Never seen it.
good stuff.
Is this your only piece of business tonight?
No.
That's it.
We just have some internal stuff. I gotta
Yeah,
talk to them
Well,
about
I will
fire
leave you to
sprinklers and code
yourself.
changes.
All right.
We didn't know to go past
I thought this would be a
midnight,
10
I
minute
did too. I
conversation.
told my wife I'm gonna be back in 20 minutes. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks, Phil.
Thank you.
I have a lot of spray foam
so. Ever hear
roofs
the
up there.
story of that roof in the building?
No.
What else do you do?
So,
Look like
what I wanted to talk to you all about a little bit is fire sprinklers and building codes. I want to get back into
Turn
the building code updates, moving from the 2015 to the 2018. I know I showed a bunch of you guys drafts of the early chapters of our code early this year. I'm hoping to get the rest done before the end of the year, so we'll look at the complete rough draft of everything by the January meeting. And then I'm going to be away on vacation in Tasmania, Australia, late January, early February. So
It's
I
gonna
won't
take you that long to get there.
I won't see you, yeah, it will, it takes a long time. I won't see you for the February meeting, but then in March, we can actually hold the public hearing on the building codes and, you know, do some outreach, see if we can get any citizen comment on it, and then make a recommendation, hopefully, to the village board. But the reason I have a presentation I want to show you on fire sprinklers is, I put it together for the village board, thinking we might do it for their kind of semi-annual retreat where they talk about issues, you know, facing the village. Only partly because of the building codes, but partly because we have the 2026 date coming up where commercial buildings that don't have sprinklers have to retrofit by January 1st of 2026, and I wanted them especially to be familiar with that. But as I'm looking into it and thinking about it, I realize there's, you know, probably a need to tweak our sprinkler requirement a little bit as to what it applies to, and maybe to consider an exemption process where if you know, if they're only required by our local amendment, which says every building gets it, that maybe we should consider, you know, kind of weighing the costs versus the benefits and provide an exemption process, which might come here for a recommendation to the village board. Anyway, so I'll give you the presentation, and you can both give me your thoughts on that concept and the presentation itself. Some of the presentation is really, you know, done as if I'm speaking to the village board, so don't think I'm talking down to you when I'm explaining how building codes work, because that's an explanation intended for them, and I know you probably don't need as much of it, but anyway. We'll see what you think.
Got my attention.
Okay. So, fire sprinklers, you know they're important, but why am I here to talk to you about them today? There's really two reasons that bring this up now. One, we have a local mandate for retrofitting commercial and multifamily buildings that's coming up soon, where they have to retrofit existing unsprinklered buildings with sprinklers by January 1st of 2026. And then two, I've been working on the process with our ABR of updating our building codes to adopt a more recent edition of the codes published by the International Code Council, to move from the 2015 to the 2018 editions. And with it, that brings us an opportunity to make any tweaks or adjustments we want to make in our local code amendments. So when you hear about this 2026 mandate, you probably wonder how we got here. This is a history of our sprinkler code requirements. Lake Bluff appears first adopted a requirement for new construction in commercial and multifamily to have fire sprinklers in 1986. We were probably not particularly new to adopt this requirement at the time. A lot of municipalities had probably adopted this in the 60s and 70s. In the 90s, as you see in 94, we added on a requirement that engineered wood products like TGIs be protected by sprinklers, whether they're in single family or multifamily or commercial, anywhere. As you can see in 2005, when we adopted a more recent edition of the I-codes in the 2003 edition, we added a local amendment that required a retrofit of sprinklers for all non-residential and residential larger than 3 units. And we only gave people at that time 3 years to get retrofitted. So we said you had to do it by 2008. So that was, that was a big jump to suddenly require all existing, other than single family or duplex, to get retrofitted. Not surprisingly, as we'll see, not everybody completed that in the 3 years they were given. As you'll see, we went on in 2007 to adopt our single-family residential fire sprinkler requirement to require, new single families that's constructed to have fire sprinklers. There's no retrofit date for existing single families, although if you do remodel and do additions that add up to 75% of the building, then existing buildings have to have sprinklers added. But if you're not doing work, there's no retrofit for single families. In 2009, the International Code Council added a requirement for sprinklers in single family for the first time. So interestingly, we were not particularly cutting edge back in '86 in adopting the commercial requirement for new construction, but we were in adopting the residential construction sprinkler requirement in 2005 or 2007. I'm sorry, and that was based on an NFPA, National Fire Protection Association recommendation at the time. But of course, now it has become common for single family to have it, post the 2009 adoption by the International Code Council. And so then, as I mentioned, that 2008 date where we only gave people 3 years to retrofit their buildings, and not everybody did it. Then in 2010, we discussed the fact that not everybody had done that, and came to the conclusion that we should give them 15 years to do that. So we extended the retrofit requirement date to January 1st, 2026. And we exempted churches if they installed a full fire alarm system, which they all did. So they're all exempt from the sprinkler requirement. Okay, so now that you know the history of how we got here, you're probably wondering why. Why are sprinklers important enough that we have these requirements? Well, the best facts and research out there is this report from the NFPA, the National Fire Protection Association, the U.S. experience with fire sprinklers. It has a lot of statistics here about fires with sprinklers and without sprinklers. In this chart that I'm showing, AES stands for, I'm drawing a blank, automatic suppression system is what AES. How does that come to AES? I don't know. It's an automatic suppression system of any type, sprinklers or any other type. So you see on the line I'm pointing to, the out of 87% of the buildings that have a fire have the automatic suppression system, and that on that line that accounts for, yeah, you do see my cursor out there, for 98% of the deaths on 87% of the fires, and 88% of the property damage. So they're not making as striking of a difference on property damage, but they're making a very striking difference on deaths and life safety. As you see the second line down, with sprinkler systems installed is 10% of the fires, and that is only 1% of the deaths. So again, we're seeing in that statistic a big difference in life safety and fewer deaths with sprinkler systems. Here is the death rate per 1,000 fires with a sprinkler system, 0.7 people per 1,000 fires, and without a sprinkler system, 6.7 people per 1,000 fires. And this is injury rates, again, 20 per 1,000 with sprinklers, 27 per 1,000 without sprinklers. And firefighter injury rates with sprinklers, 18 per 1,000 and 46 per 1,000 without sprinklers. So it makes a big difference there, which is kind of a big deal, especially since we have a volunteer fire department here and they're volunteering for this. So now that you know the history of our sprinkler requirements and why we do them, you may be wondering where they come from. Really, two places. There's the International Code Council family of codes, and then there's our local amendments that modify those and add to them. In the International Code Council, there's two main building codes, the International Building Code for commercial and the International Residential Code for single family. Here you see the first 2 pages of the International Building Code's fire sprinkler requirements, and I don't expect you to read all this text or any of it at the distance you're sitting, but this is laying out sizes of different occupancy types and the threshold of how big the building can be built to be before it requires sprinklers. But as you'll see, we modify this in our local amendments. On this page, you see the International Existing Building Code, which in the ICC family of codes, it says when you're doing remodeling and addition, at what point that triggers an upgrade of the existing building to meet some of the standards in the new codes. The I codes, as we call them, don't have any dates like our 2026 date where anyone's required to upgrade an existing building. It's only triggered by the amount of work on the building. So the IEBC, International Existing Building Code, has a threshold where they say you would have to do a fire sprinkler system in the existing building if certain conditions are met, and generally it's if you're remodeling over 50% of the building at one time. They don't consider adding up successive portions of the building, but then they also exempt you if you don't already have an existing water line adequate to accommodate it. So unfortunately, very few remodelings fall under the retrofit requirement for the IEBC and the ICC family of codes. However, you see an excerpt from our local amendments here on the right, where on the right we say, first of all, in item number 1, that all buildings have to have the fire sprinkler system throughout, and so the size and area for different occupancy types doesn't really apply in the IBC because we're requiring it for all buildings by our local amendment. The number 2 is about the existing building and the percentage of remodeling that's required before you have to add a sprinkler system. And then number 3 is the 2026 date and exempting churches there. So that's how our local amendments change things. So, obviously we have a 2026 date coming up, and certain buildings are required to to add sprinklers by that time. My predecessors left me kind of a spreadsheet that's a little complicated to read in a presentation like this, so I simplified it into two spreadsheets. One showing the buildings that have installed sprinklers since the mandate came about. So the original spreadsheet showed buildings that are required to add sprinklers because of the mandate. These 22 now have had the sprinklers installed, or actually one of them complied with the mandate by down converting to a 2-unit instead of being a, whatever they were before, a 3 or 4 unit, so they complied that way. So 22 buildings have complied with the mandate, and not all of them did it necessarily because of the mandate. So a few of them were remodeling or doing other things and did for that reason, but a lot of them, some of them did it because of the mandate, including we did all our public works pole barns, as you see down on the bottom line. So that leaves the unsprinklered buildings, 17 left, although, you know, some, like the Park District, has at least 3 buildings. I think the golf clubhouse and a couple storage buildings, and the village has on the bottom line the Walnut House that we still need to sprinkle. So what's not on this spreadsheet? Well, I guess some things were never put on this spreadsheet. Maybe by common sense, you would never want a sprinkler system in these. It's certainly difficult to do systems when you don't have any heated space, and little need for it when you can so easily get out of an open-sided structure. That maybe it's common sense that you just don't do it for some of these structures, like our gazebo or our two pavilions down at the beach that the Park District has. However, looking at the definition, when we said all buildings in our local amendment, and we didn't put a particular definition of buildings in our local amendment, so we look to the code that we're amending, the IBC, it has a pretty broad definition of building. In the current code, 2015, it's any structure used or intended for supporting or sheltering any use or occupancy. That's pretty broad. I'm glad they're narrowing it slightly in 2018 by taking use out of there, and it's only supporting or sheltering any occupancy, but that still may not clearly exempt our gazebo or our Park District shelters or our salt shed down in the Public Works building, which is the open-sided structure there. Is the salt shed is the only shed that they didn't already add sprinklers to out at Public Works. So it's a good thing we're in the code amendment process, because we could easily add an amendment to that, paragraph 3 that you saw earlier, and exempt open-sided freestanding structures without combustible storage, and exempt them, and that would cover our salt shed and the 2 beach pavilions and our gazebo. But are there other things on here that wouldn't make sense to add sprinklers to? One of the notes my predecessors left on here is about this building, which is the historic powerhouse originally for the commuter trains that went by south of 176 back when there were train tracks there. Today it's ComEd's building, has a lot of transformers and electrical equipment in there. One of my predecessors' notes was, well, you're really not doing a good thing if you start spraying water all over the electrical equipment, because there's a problem. You're probably going to make that problem worse there. So, you know, what this brings up is maybe we want to have a process to consider the merits of certain exemptions or partial exemptions. I think this building has a boiler room in the basement. There may be some parts of the building that do make sense to have sprinklers to, but there may be other parts, such as the large areas of the building that are filled with electrical equipment, that it doesn't make sense to have sprinklers to. There's other buildings, like down at the beach, there's a restroom building that has the water heater and a little utility room with the water heater in it and all that. Now, that building could either be a very easy building to add sprinklers to, or a very difficult building to add sprinklers to. It all depends on whether the water line to the building is big enough to accommodate the sprinklers. If it's big enough, it might be easy to just add a few heads in there and have a sprinkler system. But if they've got to run a water line from up on Sunrise down here to add a few sprinklers for a couple restrooms, we may want to consider whether it's worth giving them an exemption on that. There's buildings out there like Terlato Wines, which is, until you get to the attic, it's mostly concrete and masonry solid wall construction, which not only makes it relatively fire resistant, but also makes it, means that there's not really concealed spaces to run sprinkler pipes, and they've got a lot of decoration and ornament on the existing masonry. But they've said they have no problem with putting sprinklers in the basement. They could probably do it pretty easily in the attic where there's combustible materials. So we may want to consider whether it's worth making them do the first and second floor. But that may depend on a lot of factors. So there may be a lot of factors we'd want to consider in an exemption process. One is the unusual practical difficulties in installing sprinklers, like we saw in several of these instances. The difficult solid construction of Terlato, the long distance for the line for the beach building, the electrical equipment you don't want to spray with water in the ComEd building. Whether the I-codes would require sprinklers, which is interesting in the Terlato case. It's a business occupancy, which is not required under the IBC to have sprinklers. However, they do have a few events there, and you can only have a assembly use up to 49 people as an accessory to a business occupancy. So if they went more than 49 in a gathering, then the I-codes would require a sprinkler system in the building, which is probably something we want to consider keeping in if we consider an exemption. And of course, we'd want to consider, size of the building, hazards present, occupant load, access for firefighting, and whether it meets or exceeds codes for egress and other life safety requirements. And of course, these could be considered as, partial exemptions or exemptions with conditions. There's one more thing I wanted to add at the end, and now I forgot what it was. This is the last slide, too. Oh, shoot, I forgot that. I wanted to say one more thing, and now I forgot what it was. Okay. Well, anyway, this is the end of the presentation. So I guess if we're talking about an exemption process, it might come here for recommendations and all to the village board. The code amendment definitely would come here for recommendation to the village board. So what do you guys all think about those?
No, your intent is to give this presentation to the board.
Yeah, right.
Can you shorten it?
Right. I could, yeah, right, I could.
And I don't know what to leave out. But I was just making up some questions about, and some of them you answered as I was writing them down, like,
Yeah,
how many have not complied? You got that on a chart.
right,
But
yeah, it
you've
was
already
like
said
17, I
17
think.
or whatever it
Yeah,
was.
right.
And somebody, what's a TGI? It's just, you mentioned it. You're gonna say, what are you talking about?
Right, yeah, I would have to explain that to them, yeah.
And then
Right.
somebody else is liable to say, well, why do we have to do that if we got detectors? We got a code for detectors, smoking, and
Right.
I'm just trying to think of devil's advocate thing.
Right,
The other thing is, and you sort of touched on historic structures.
yeah, right,
Toronto, and there's, even some of the other places in town. And somebody's gonna say, well, should you send notices out again to those 17?
right. We're planning to do that, I think, after
Okay,
the code
so those are
amendments
just
done.
things that I popped
Yeah,
up,
right.
as you were talking.
Yeah, right.
But it's,
Doesn't a building have to be heated to be sprinklered?
Well, I mean, there are dry pipe systems. There's also antifreeze systems, although those are kind of frowned on. There are dry pipe systems for unheated spaces. The issue with that is you usually have a heated sprinkler room to make the connection to a wet pipe and all that. So you really, it would be a challenge to do it without having, you know, if you're doing the gazebo, I guess you could do a pit in the ground or something, just like, you know, there is
You have to have a pump.
Well, a lot of the
Well, it
buildings you
depends
showed
on the
were
size.
You
of-
need a
small buildings
compressor.
too, right?
Yeah.
Like some
Need
of
a
the
source
beach
of
buildings, they're not
compressed
heated in the
So-
winter, right?
Yeah, I don't, right, they probably do winterize the beach building, yeah, right. Probably, yeah.
Is there anything in there that'll burn, well, probably, the building itself won't burn if it does good. That's a real eyesore.
Right, yeah, right, yeah.
How does
Is
this
the,
fit with, how does this fit with alarm systems?
Well, I mean, they both, you know, the alarm system is to let the occupants know they need to get out. The sprinkler system is to really give them time to get out. So they're complementary.
The experience I've actually had, I mean, we've had some fires in apartment buildings. Is the worst situation I ever had was when they didn't have a sprinkler system or an alarm system.
Oh, that's
And
bad.
that turned out to be pretty bad. The only unit in that building that didn't have any problems is one guy on the second floor had some duct tape, and he duct taped around his entry door, and then he climbed down from the balcony. He had no damage whatsoever.
Oh, wow.
Everybody else had enormous smoke damage and had to throw all their clothes away and everything. But then we've had other fires where we had sprinklers in the building, but somebody took a mop and they used endust on it, and then they stuck it in the closet where the water heater is. And of course, when the water heater went on, the thing burst into flames. The smoke alarms went off, and the fire department was there quickly enough to stop it. Probably cost $5,000 in damage. The sprinklers never went off.
Okay.
And I know at Fort Sheridan, a lot of the historic buildings there, they did it totally with alarm systems. They, in lieu of sprinklers, they made them put in like twice as many alarms. And I'm not aware of any deaths of any kind there, and there's, you know, 700-800 people that live there. So I get the feeling some of this is overboard.
Does insurance go up with, I mean, I don't think insurance companies love the sprinkler systems, right? Because most of the damage is the water damage.
Yeah.
Like a false, right? I mean, I'm sure, do you see insurance go up when you have sprinklers?
Or does it
versus
go, or does it go
non-sprinkled
down?
buildings?
Can you get a credit? and
The
make it
sprinkler
go down?
industry claims that your insurance rates, premiums will go down with the sprinkler system.
Right.
Whether
I've heard that
that's
claim.
accurate or not, I don't know.
Yeah, I've heard opposite for resident, you know, because you get false and it just ruins, you know, one sprinkler head going off is gonna ruin.
Well, and usually when they say the insurance will go down, it's such that for a normal investment, you'd look for a payback in about 5 years. Your insurance goes down enough that you get payback in about 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
So it's a good selling point for the insurance industry, but it's not a.
I would think one way to shorten this a little bit maybe is the history of the sprinkler code might be a little, you know, you may say where you are now and where you need to be. I don't know if you, I don't know, it just seems,
Maybe just only include the retrofit.
yeah, maybe not so much of the
requirements.
information on the history of our sprinkler system. I don't think that adds to.
Probably
I mean,
not.
It's good background from it, but I think you kind of lose me on that too, because it's like, I just want to get to where we are and where we need to be, not so
Right.
much.
I feel like in there I'm switching back and forth between different things because there's the adopting requirements for new construction
Yeah.
versus retrofit versus.
Yeah, I know, it is
all
very
that.
complicated,
Yeah.
for sure.
When we first started that, and that was Jerry,
Yeah.
and I don't know, were you here when we did that? Yeah, and Jerry was hyper-focused on that stuff.
Right, yeah.
And, but when it came to, like, the industrial park, this room was full.
Yeah.
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 This room was full.
Yeah.
Of the contractors and the owners and the real estate developers, and, you know, it was packed.
And we gave the exemption to churches because one of the churches in town couldn't afford to put sprinklers in.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the reason. But when you think about the need for fire sprinklers, if you're in a church
assembly,
at
yes.
Christmas time and you got people lighting candles all over the place,
Right.
that's a really risky place to be.
Right. Yeah. Right.
I'm not sure the Supreme Court would let you mandate that churches put in fire sprinklers,
Well, I'm not sure our park district, can we mandate that the park district do it? They're different governments.
Yeah, they are part of the mandate. So they have 3 buildings that are required to the golf clubhouse, and then 2 of their maintenance buildings north of the golf
Well, the big,
clubhouse there.
the big
You might be right
rec
about that.
center, now that's gotta be.
That's already
I don't know,
sprinkled, yeah,
it could be
yeah.
mandated. They have to follow the building code.
The, I like the idea of an exemption process.
Uh-huh.
Because looking at it from our owner's standpoint, the 2026 deadline, somebody puts in a sprinkler system because they're worried about, you know, they want to be a good citizen and so forth, and then the board, you know, extends it for another 8 years or whatever, I think I'd be pretty unhappy.
Right.
So I would think that, you know, an exemption system would be good. I just wonder who would have the expertise to determine whether a sprinkler, you know, is a good idea or not, you know, I mean, because fire is a real kind of specialty. I mean, flame spread, combustibility of materials, you know, all of that would, you know, kind of, you know, obviously what the building's use is would be a big deal.
Well, I think one guideline is we'd probably generally only want to consider, you know, applications where the I codes wouldn't require sprinklers if they were building that new today, you know? Like the, you know, the Torlado, if that's just a business building and there's no assembly, or the assembly's, you know, accessory, less than 49 people, they could build it new today without sprinklers, if we didn't have any local amendments under the I code. So we probably wouldn't want to do waivers that, you know, that waive a requirement that would be in the IBC if we went, if it was being built new
Oh, I
today,
see, so
you know,
you're
use
suggesting
that as a
they kind of
guideline.
need to meet all of those criteria.
Yeah, right. But they are guidelines, and I do have to admit that, like, for Torlado, it is kind of, it does get into kind of a gray area. You could debate about whether they would meet the IBC criteria if they were building it new today, because besides the 49 people for your assembly area to be accessory to business, there's also a 750 square foot limit, which I think their dining room is less than, but, you know, say you have your before dinner drink in one room of the building and, you know, wander through. I mean, if you really wanted to get technical, you could argue about whether they're truly meeting it, which is why I think it would be a guideline, not a hard rule about, you know, all these would be
before
guidelines
Tornado
for making a decision.
Took over that, and it was, I can't remember what it was called, but before Toledo, I went to a number of parties there was probably 300 people there,
Oh, yeah.
all
wow.
over the place.
Yeah,
And, you know, that'd be a tough place to sprinkle.
yeah, right,
Because it's an old estate, and it's, you know, pretty ornate on the inside.
right, yeah.
And, you know,
Probably
you can't-
you'd have to resort to like exposed piping and stuff.
That's what you'd have to do. You can't get into it. If you did,
Well,
you,
I don't know, our fire chief thought you could just do soffits or something, coves, big coves.
Yeah, it's
Your
pretty hard to
cove
do.
molding would be,
You could
Huge,
probably do that. I
Yeah,
mean, with,
right.
you know, I mean, it's like anything else. You throw enough money at something, you know, you can generally overcome all the problems.
Yes, right.
What's the penalty if they don't? Like by 2026, what happens if someone doesn't?
well, the penalty
Meets the claim.
clause, yeah, the penalty clause for all our building codes says up to $750 per day of violation, so starting January 1st. But you'd have to, you know, go to court and ask a judge, and then he would set anything, you know, up to less than that per day you could set.
I'm just curious.
Right, yeah.
Because I'm kind of wondering, how many of those buildings meet the I-codes, you know, waiver requirement there that you've got up there,
Right,
number two?
I think not very many. I know there's, you know, at least one building out in the industrial park where somebody really wants to campaign to, you know, to remove the retrofit requirement, but I think they would not be in compliance with the I codes if they're building that today. I think a lot of these would actually require sprinklers under the I codes today.
Do all those buildings have alarm systems?
I would hope so. I haven't, a lot of these buildings have not done much work and I haven't been in there, but I would hope they all have alarm systems. They should.
The other thing is that, you know, two of the things that pop out to me is like the post office, Commonwealth Edison. You know, it doesn't seem like those entities are likely to just roll over and, say uncle, when the village says you know, we're gonna fine you $750 a day.
Well, the post office is just a tenant. They're not the owner.
Oh,
They're-
okay.
It's a
All right.
privately owned building. They're just renting.
Okay.
So we go to the building owner, not the
Yeah,
post office.
right.
But
right, yeah.
the old, power plant down there is full of transformers.
Yeah.
You can't even walk through there. I mean, it's just like, it's full. It'd be foolish to try and put a sprinkler system in there.
Right. That might well meet
No, they
the,
own that.
Oh, they own it, okay.
Yeah, right.
that might well, meet the requirement for the I-codes business, because I would think that a place like that, the I-codes wouldn't require a sprinkler, or maybe they would require,
Would have to
a
be
different type
foam or
of fire,
something.
right, a different type of fire
But it's
suppression.
Yeah,
big.
right.
That's not multi-story,
Right. Yeah, it's all one big open space in there.
open space. And nobody's in there. I don't know what they do when they go there. You know,
Well, yeah, that's a question. When you read the code up there, it said, if the building was built for occupancy. Well, that's not built for occupancy. I don't know how you define
there's
occupancy.
no offices, there's nothing in there that I know of.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? Yeah.
But that's-
Right, you could argue that it's not a building because it's not sheltering any occupancy, possibly. Could possibly argue that.
When I used to build medical supplies warehouses, we always had the Factory Mutual on one side and the fire department on the other side. And the fire department wanted more doors and more ways for people to get out. And Factory Mutual wanted only one door, because you open up two doors and you run away, people leave the doors open, and then you fan the flames, and then all the product burns up, and then they lose a lot of money. So it was a continual fight between the fire departments and Factory Mutual over things like that. We also took some of the plastic product and did test burns with it. And we found two things. One is, if you take 4 pallets and put them 3 stories high and do a burn with it, and then you put the sprinklers on, it forced the heat to go all into the middle, and it burned hotter than if you didn't have sprinklers. It's just a physics of the way the thing happened. And so, I mean, I think about places like Target with all the plastic they've got in there, because I've seen some other tests where they have plastics, and you get the plastic on fire and the sprinkler's not gonna do any good. You put it underwater, it's gonna burn till it consumes itself. And it doesn't matter if it's getting air or not. And so what we did with the warehouses that had all plastic supplies, we had in-rack sprinklers and above sprinklers, and the whole idea was to put the fire up before it got through the cardboard to get to the plastic.
Oh, yeah.
Because also the plastic, once it starts burning, you know, as a Boy Scout, I learned that when there's a fire, you drop to the floor, because the heat's gonna go up. Well, with the plastic, it's gonna put poisons down on the floor, and if you go to the floor, you're probably gonna kill yourself with the poison.
Oh, wow.
Interesting.
So, I mean, like you said, there's all kinds of considerations on something like this.
I did a
Right,
whole
yeah,
bunch of libraries, and I was always in an argument that you cannot try and burn a book someday. Get that guy on fire. It can't happen.
Yeah, yeah.
You cannot burn a book. You see libraries that have burned to the ground, and the books are all charred, but you can open them up and read them.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just like drywall. You know, it insulates itself, prevents it from.
Anyway,
But it seems to me, Mike, that the issue of fire sprinklers and so forth and the requirements thereof are not going to change here in the village. based on the new codes. Am I understanding what you're saying?
Right, yeah, going from the 2015 to the 2018
Right,
I codes,
right.
right, yeah, that won't really make any change.
Right,
Yeah.
so really the thing is the question of, the 2026 deadline.
Right,
And, I would have a suspicion that some kind of an exemption scheme might be better than, because sure as shooting, 10 or 12 of those buildings aren't gonna get sprinkled. And they're gonna come back to the village board and say, oh, it's gonna be too expensive, I'm gonna close up if you guys make me do this, all of that. And the board will say, well, okay, we'll give you another 5 years, and, it would seem to me if the goal is to kind of put it to rest, make, say this building situation is more hazardous from a fire standpoint than this building. And therefore, we're gonna require sprinklers there and not in another building. I think that's a good idea. I'm not sure who makes that decision, but,
right.
I'm supposed do we have fire protection people in the fire department, or?
We don't. It's really just me and the Lake Forest, we have an arrangement with Lake Forest Building Department where they do some of our plan reviews and inspections, so their fire prevention inspector there does the fire alarm and fire sprinkler reviews.
Right.
They have somebody who worked in those trades doing those
If you go
reviews.
back to when the 2010, when the last major update,
Uh-huh.
how many fires have there been in these buildings? I can think of one fire in a residential building that wasn't sprinklered, but I can't think of any others.
Yeah, that is a good question.
There's a lot of alarms that go off all the time.
There are a lot of
All the
alarms that
time.
go off,
I mean,
yeah.
These guys are hopping in the truck and going down there
Right.
to shut off an alarm.
Sure.
I mean, like
They have to, because they don't know what's going on.
well, right. I mean, like the restaurants will set off their alarms, fairly often with smoke from whatever, cooking or something. But which of those are a real fire? There have been a few fires, and it's not really always the building structure that catches on fire. There was one of the buildings out in the industrial park. They had machinery to do some routing on metal, and they always had aluminum work done on one router and steel work on the other router. Well, one day, like one of the routers was down or something, they needed to do some steel work on the router that they used for aluminum. Well, steel makes sparks and aluminum is shavings are flammable. When they started using the steel on those, then they're both the same router, done two different tables. When they started working on the steel on the aluminum router, their dust collecting bag burst into flames and made a pretty dramatic fire from what I heard. But fortunately they had a concrete floor and everything, so it didn't go anywhere. And the fire department came and sprayed it with water, and then that made even more fireworks that impressed everybody.
So is there any major buildings out there that don't comply yet? Or are they just some of the, actually, most of them are fairly good size. There's not any little ones.
Yeah, I mean, there's some buildings in the industrial park. If you start like 3 and 4 on this list over on North Shore Drive and Sherwood Terrace and Sherwood Drive, there's several. There's 5 buildings out in the industrial park that are sizable there.
What else? So the other thing, now, doesn't this have to go eventually to the zoning board? 'Cause
No.
they don't do this.
No, because-
they're responsible for codes even
Right,
though.
right. Building codes are Title 9, zoning code is Title 10. They're only responsible for the zoning code, so it doesn't go to them.
Okay.
So these changes will just go from here to the village board. Okay. So it sounds like everyone likes the concept. I'm hearing on the presentation, shorten the presentation a little bit, take out some of the history, but you like the concept
Yeah.
of the exemption and all that.
You would think
process.
that in the exceptions, they would have to have some kind of alarm system though, right? Is
Yeah,
a given?
that would be a good requirement to put in, yeah.
Even a
right.
heat sensor, and then
Right.
that's like
Right.
connected to the, do we have systems connected to the fire department directly, right?
No, everything goes to a private
private-
UL-listed central station, and
Okay,
they
then
call
that
it
gives it-
911 these days,
Yeah.
right? Because that gives us more flexibility, because dispatch can be located several different
Oh, it's
places.
in
We're-
Glenview.
Yeah, we're consolidated, and Glenview and Highland Park can both operate it
see.
in different locations, so there's no more direct lines with that system.
Apparently it works.
Yeah, right, it
When they
does.
decided to do that, it's like, oh, that's the dumbest thing ever.
Yeah. Yeah, it does seem to work well. It's good, for emergencies to have the flexibility to be able to operate it out of different locations.
Some of the ones you talked about not needing it as examples, the gazebo and those bathrooms down at the beach.
Mm-hmm.
Those are perfect places for some high school age or college age kid who wants to go out and create mayhem to go in and start a fire. So if they at least had, I don't think alarms, the sprinklers make sense there, but it would be a lot less expensive to put some alarms in.
There are heat detectors in those two
Oh, there
beach
are?
gazebos, yeah, right. Because they have fireplaces there, and they wanted to have a detector in case things got out of control, so they have heat
Yeah,
detectors
Yeah,
there.
good,
Yeah.
good.
I would think sprinkler heads in the gazebo, talking about young people. I'm sure someone would want to see how you can set off a fire sprinkler.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, right,
Yeah, that's silly.
right.
The,
I would do that.
Mike, the other thing I was thinking about is, in that list of exemptions to consider would be, the type of construction and so on and so forth. Now, maybe the I-codes part plays into that, but,
Right. Yeah, right, that's a consideration.
the
Yeah, I think the codes-
flammability of, just stuff.
Right, right.
Are they storing fuel oil?
right.
But I agree
Yeah.
with you in general, there should be a list of exemptions. I don't know how to do it, but
Okay, well, thanks for all that feedback. Right,
Anything else, anybody?
I move to adjourn.
okay.
For 2 items, it's been a very long meeting.
Yeah, right, longer than I expected. Do we
good.
have a second?
No.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, Mike.
Go ahead.
Sure, no
Back in
problem.
the battle.
Back in.
This is a long meeting. Good to have you.
Good to see you guys.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks, Mike. Nice job on your presentation.
Yeah, thanks.